Hey everyone, bienvenidos. Welcome back to Mexico Relocation Guide. My name is Mariana. I am joined by my friend Travis, who owns Mexico News Daily. We're going to be talking about so many cool things today, so many hot topics from, are foreigners still welcome in Mexico? What's it like to actually live in Mexico? Travis is going to talk about why he chose Mexico. He's from Chicago originally, but why he chose San Miguel de Allende, why San Miguel de Allende is kind of still one of the top leading places for people to move to in Mexico, and so many other things that I think you guys will find a lot of value in, because Travis has so much experience from not only living in Mexico for over 20 years, but just from running Mexico News Daily. He reports on the news all across the country in English, and I personally I love that newspaper. I think it's a great online newspaper that brings you really good facts, talks about the things that are going across Mexico in English, and then of course there's a couple of pieces in there that Travis and his team writes. But I would rather Travis tell you guys about himself. But before we get right into it, I see you guys are joining in. I'm going to cover some topics with Travis, but please, by all means, start asking your questions, because these live streams are for you. We're here to be able to give you guys just our perspective and our insight. So, Travis, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me, Mariana. It's great to be here.
Why don't you tell people a bit about yourself, and then we'll go into a bit about Mexico News Daily.
Sure. So thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Travis Bembenek. I live in San Miguel de Allende. Just a little correction from what Mariana said. I'm actually from Wisconsin. Originally, I've lived in the Chicago area for a long time after that. But, my journey with Mexico really began almost 30 years ago when I was studying at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was studying business, and it was when the North American Free Trade Agreement was being signed. And I was looking at my business degree and saying, how can I add some more value to this? And so I thought maybe I should learn Spanish, and I should learn it in Mexico. So I actually, although my university had multiple programs to Spain, I chose Mexico and studied in Guadalajara for a semester in January of 1996. So that's really where it all began. I was kind of maybe the typical Wisconsin kid at that time, that the only place I had been to outside of the country was Canada. And so it was a real eye-opening experience for me. And I guess I'd say that since then, I really, it changed my life. That 6-month period in Mexico truly changed my life. I fell in love with the people, the culture, the food, the cities, the beaches, you name it, the music. And ever since then, I've always had a connection with the country. So when I graduated college, I spent a lot of time doing business with Mexico. I've actually done business with Mexico or in Mexico, literally since I graduated. And I got married with my wife is from India originally, but we got married on the beach in Mexico. We've traveled just about everywhere in the country, and we're now proud residents and have been full-time in San Miguel de Allende for almost 5.5, 6 years now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, tell us a bit about Mexico News Daily. So, what can people expect? Why are you guys different? Yeah, tell us more about your awesome project.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the kind words about Mexico News Daily. I guess I just step back and say, everyone, when they consider moving or relocating to Mexico, has different motivations, right? Some people just want to get out of the cold. Some people are looking for a different cost of living. Some people are, have always dreamed of living near a beach or living in the mountains. In our case, my wife and I had been, actively in the large corporate world. So we worked for large organizations. We worked hard. We traveled a lot in our jobs. It was a very intense lifestyle. And what we were looking for, and what always brought us to Mexico, was we just felt different moving to or spending time in Mexico. We just felt different. We liked who we were as individuals, and we liked who we were as a couple better when we were in Mexico.
Oh, interesting.
And so we had always been, sort of talking about how could we spend more time there. And then the pandemic came, right? Mm-hmm. So, the COVID pandemic came, and we thought, if anything is telling us that this is the time, it's the pandemic, right? And so that was really the opportunity where we could start a new chapter in life. It gave a lot of us time to think and reflect on where our lives were up to that point, and where we wanted to go forward. And so we made the leap and jumped to Mexico at the start of the pandemic. Right when the pandemic began, we were actually in Tulum on vacation, but shortly after that, we were permanently in San Miguel de Allende. And so we because it sort of happened suddenly, there had been some planning for years that at some point we wanted to get to Mexico. But when the COVID pandemic came, it was a obviously sudden, unexpected event. And so we weren't really, I guess I'd say, totally prepared for what that next chapter was going to look like. So we were living in San Miguel de Allende and talking and reflecting, as many of us were, spending a lot of time at home during the beginning phase of the pandemic, about what do we want that next chapter to look like in terms of what are we going to do, right? And I think that's important, because a lot of people and friends and family would say, wow, you're retiring, you're moving to Mexico. And we would say, look, it's not retiring, it's just starting a new chapter with open pages on that chapter that aren't written yet. So as we were spending time here, thinking, reflecting, talking, we wanted to figure out how we could make an impact on the country that's been so good to us over these years. And, in San Miguel de Allende, there's over 120 NGOs. So there's a hugely active volunteer community that does outstanding work. But we wanted to look at doing something where we could help sort of drive it a little more directly. We were avid readers of the news throughout our life. I actually was a reader of Mexico News Daily leading up into the pandemic. And one thing we thought about, in addition to trying to figure out how we could make an impact on the country, was we always had this frustration about the perception that the outside world has about Mexico, right? If you ask anybody about Mexico, or you read any news, typically in the international media, I would say 9 out of 10 times it's a negative article, right? It's a murder with the cartels, it's violence, it's drugs, it's human trafficking, it's border issues. 9 out of 10, if not 99 out of 100 times, it's a negative story. And unfortunately, all of those things do exist in Mexico. But those of us that know Mexico well know that's a small portion of the country, right? There's so much more to the country, and yet the media tends to never focus on those things. And so we said, well, what if we could help shape the narrative and change the perception that the outside world has about Mexico by providing more balanced and complete coverage of the country, right? So instead of those articles being solely focused on these negative shock value, clickbait type articles, what if we could tell the stories of the good in the country, right? The good and the bad. So, what locals are doing to make the country better, how the economy is doing. Obviously we have this amazing story now of our president, Claudia Sheinbaum, and everything she's trying to do to improve the country. And so really that motivation of looking to do good, and also frustration with the narrative that the world has of Mexico. And if you think about it as a loop, the more negativity there is to Mexico, the more people are afraid to come here, afraid to come move here, afraid to travel here, afraid to buy a second home here. And ultimately that negative narrative holds back the country, right? It holds back investment from coming into the country, and it does the country no good. So that was really the driving force motivation. I guess if I had to add a last thing, I'd say, the media is doing a lot of bad in the world these days. There's a lot of cynicism. Most of us can't even watch TV news anymore because it doesn't feel informative. It feels like an opinion being forced down your throat on whatever political side of the aisle you're on. And I've been really frustrated with that. I've been an avid news reader my whole life. And I thought, why is it that we're allowing media, instead of helping bring about a better world, it's sort of tearing us down, right? It's making us
dividing us.
negative, scared, angry, polarizing. We all felt during the pandemic, especially, the country, no matter really what country you were in, the country, the state you lived in, the city, the county, the school district, all became polarized, right? And the media sort of reinforced that and gave so much space to that narrative. And we thought, look, at the end of the day, media has a duty and a responsibility and a real role in society to bring us together on what does connect us, on what is good in society, not just purely picking on the negative. And so that was another motivator as well.
I love that, Travis. And by the way, you guys, I've been showing you some slides just so you have an idea of what Mexico News Daily looks like, just in case you were like, why is that happening? I was just showing you guys what Mexico News Daily looks like, what you can expect their interface to be like, and just some of the articles that Travis shared with me on what you guys might expect to read whenever you visit Mexico News Daily. Before we get into a couple of other things, Travis, I wanted to mention that you actually have a really cool special for our audience tonight. And he's offering you guys 1 month free if you sign up.
I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully we get Mariana back quickly. I think everybody else is there.
Sorry, I lost my power for 2 seconds.
No problem.
But I'm going to give you guys the link in the comments section here.
If I can just comment while you're doing that, Mariana, I would say a lot of you are probably thinking, part of the reason I want to consider moving to Mexico is to get away from the news, right? The last thing I want to do is read about politics in Mexico when politics in Canada or politics in the US is driving me insane, right? So I get that. And I guess I'd encourage you, and that's why we're offering you guys a month just to get to know us. We don't ask for a credit card or anything like that. If you click on the link Mariana is showing, you just put in a username and your email and you're good to go. You can start reading. But that point of how so many of us are wanting to tune out the news is scary and sad. And I guess I just challenge all of you considering moving to Mexico or already living here. Don't do that here. Things aren't as depressing, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, as doom and gloom.
In the media, it's not as doom and gloom. You know, I remember when we bought Mexico News Daily a couple of years ago, I said, we're not going to cover politics, right? There's no reason to cover politics. Nobody cares about politics in Mexico. And I was very wrong in that. And we've actually changed our coverage. Again, it's not a political statement, but sort of the case study of Claudia Sheinbaum as a leader, the first woman president in Mexico's history, the first Jewish president in Mexico's history, you know, inheriting a legacy from quite a personality and almost a cult figure in the country. And then seeing how she's navigating the country, given both the United States and Canada both having new presidents as well. It's fascinating. And you don't read about it and want to just, close your eyes and cry or something. It's inspiring, it's uplifting, it's motivating to see how this leader, again, forget what political party she's from, but just as a leader, what she's doing and how she's navigating this tumultuous
how she's
world.
Leading the country. Because I mean, you got to know that people will, follow a good example. So if she's actually a great example, then you can understand that the Mexican people will stand behind her, and they do. Oh my God, they do. So yeah, without getting too much into politics, but I want to mention too, you have a lot of really, it's not all like, it is a lot of news, but I feel like you guys make it light. You make it fun to read. You make it very informational, but also unbiased. And that's very important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for pointing that out. I guess I'd highlight, we have a team of nearly 75 people now. We're in 15 states of Mexico and 6 countries. And, we've got Mexicans, but also Australians, Canadians, Americans, and Brits on our team. And so we have this diverse group who is all motivated by the idea of selecting the stories that are most relevant to people who want to learn about Mexico, right? Thinking of an expat audience or a foreign audience who's trying to learn more about the country. And so if you're trying to learn about different places to live and what's going on there, if you're looking to learn about climate in different areas, if you're looking to learn about what's going on in the expat community, if you're looking for inspiration on why you should move here or different places you should move in the country, if you're looking to learn more about the pyramids, if you're looking to learn more about the Maya train, a recently opened 1,000-mile train throughout the Mayan peninsula or the Yucatan Peninsula, checking out different pyramids. We really, without a political bias, as Mariana said, we are striving to have the depth of content of a newspaper like the New York Times. Again, not being political, but just the depth of content. We have articles on food, recipes, the history of different foods in Mexico and why they exist, culture. And then we also have this business side. We think, despite what's happening in tariffs right now, which affects a lot of people and a lot of businesses, and unfortunately, and it hits home to me because, as I mentioned, my whole connection with Mexico started with the North American Free Trade Agreement. So it really hurts for me to see that sort of being unwound to a certain extent. I feel like that's a real topic that deserves a lot of debate and discussion. And so we have a very solid business section as well, just on sort of, different trends economically and who's investing here and where they're investing and why they're investing. So I think that's worth checking out as well.
Yeah, it gives you a good temperature of the country. Like,
For sure.
Even if you're not planning on investing in Mexico, even if you're not opening a business, it's good to know what the economy is like. That way,
Absolutely.
like how much unemployment there is, and if you're going to see a lot of poverty or not, or those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So yeah, I personally love reading what you have to write. Switching gears here a little bit, because
Sure.
I know that a lot of people are obviously, very interested in reading part of the news, but some of the hot topics that I think that you guys have recently covered and I think are worth bringing up are, things like, are foreigners still welcome in Mexico? And I know that you can't necessarily speak on behalf of everyone, but just because I know that you also report on, for example, the Mexico City protest. You also report on how you see, maybe inflation and those kinds of things affecting communities, and what do other news channels talk about when they talk about this gentrification topic. So just in your opinion and based on, what you write, how do you feel about that? What do you say when somebody asks you, hey, are we still welcome here? Does Mexico still want foreigners? What do you
That's a
think?
great question. It's a great question, and it's very relevant and timely. I think, and again, I'm not trying to inject any political bias here at all, but I think it's quite obvious that Mexicans in the United States are feeling a little uncomfortable with the way they're being treated, even if they're irregardless of their status. It's an uncomfortable time, right? So it may not be directly them, but it may be a friend, a colleague, a family member, and so it's an uncomfortable time for a lot of immigrants in the United States in particular, and obviously Mexicans being the largest immigrant group in the country. So there's that sort of in the background, and then you have this accelerating trend of more and more foreigners discovering how great Mexico is, right? Just for some perspective, Mexico has 132 million people, 132 million. In addition, there's 1.6 million Americans. When I say Americans, I mean people from the United States, and about 400,000 Canadians, right? So using round numbers, there's about 2 million Americans and Canadians living in Mexico out of 132 million. Right. So it's still a relatively very small number, but it is increasing. right? The other thing is it's increasing, and I'm sure you learned this watching Mariana, it's increasing everywhere, right? Which I think is a good thing. It's not just one city or one beach area that's booming. It's really sort of this consistent trend of more and more Americans and Canadians throughout the country. Now, there are certain hotspots, right? And one that has been in the news frequently lately is a neighborhood in Mexico City, or a couple neighborhoods called Condesa and La Roma, or Roma Norte. That area is really, this super hip, trendy, outstanding area to live and work and play. And it's been that way and been being gentrified by Mexicans for decades, right? And we've written about that because, these recent protests, it's important to note they're very small, right? So they get a lot of coverage. I'm sure you've seen them on CNN even. For perspective, some of these have been like 200 people, right? So they're very small in a city of 23 million people. And really, it's important to dissect and really understand what is being protested. And when you understand that, you as an expat or a foreigner, I think, can be a lot more relieved. Because what's happening is Mexico is becoming a wealthier country. Mexico has neighborhoods that for Mexicans are increasingly, exciting to live in. And that is pushing up the demand and pushing up the cost, right? You then have this other factor that more and more record amounts of tourists are coming to Mexico every year, including Mexico City. Mexico City has been really discovered, I think, on the tourist track. And as a result, the amount of Airbnb units is increasing dramatically in some of these hot areas as well. So you have a desirable place for locals to live, an increasing flow of expats coming in, and increasing amounts of tourists coming in to the same neighborhoods. And obviously, as it does throughout the world, that creates problems and tensions, right? Primarily, and I would say first off, cost of living, right? A lot of the people who wanted to live there or used to live there can't afford to live there anymore. And so that's been sort of manifesting itself into this, gentrification protest, or, are Americans and Canadians welcome anymore? I guess I just wrote something recently where I said, I think actually Mexico needs more foreigners coming to the country. And again, I sort of looked at those numbers of 2 million out of 132 million, less than 2% of this country is foreign born. For some perspective, in the United States, 12% of the entire United States is Mexican, right? 16% is foreign born. Canada is 22% foreign born. Now, I'm not saying a rapidly increasing and large foreign-born population doesn't bring its set of challenges. Of course it does. But Mexico isn't even close to the levels in any city throughout the country to what is just a normal level of foreign-born residents in really the rest of the world. Where I live in San Miguel.
That's not only in Mexico. Sorry, I want to make sure that I point this out, because you mentioned earlier the hotspots. That's not only like in Mexico as a whole, but even in the hotspots, I think there's this misconception that like Ajijic or San Miguel de Allende is like predominantly foreign, and it's not the case.
No, I think it's interesting. I love hearing people say, oh man, San Miguel de Allende is just all gringos. I mean, it's all, and usually it's these old gringos, retired gringos. And whenever somebody says that, I can tell they haven't probably ever been here, or they probably haven't been here in many, many years, because it couldn't be further from the truth. And I don't say that anecdotally. The foreign-born population in San Miguel de Allende is less than 10%. So imagine that for a minute, this sort of, smallish, mid-sized town in the middle of Mexico that is the epicenter of, gringo activity, has less foreign-born people than just any random city in the United States or Canada, right? So it sort of really puts it in perspective that the population is still very small here in terms of foreign-born residents. And you asked a little bit ago, do people still feel welcome here? And I think, that's a good discussion for us to have for a minute or two. I mean, there's a reason so many of us love traveling to Mexico, right? And I think part of that is we feel welcome here, right? People are nice, people are funny, people smile, people make an attempt to speak your language. All of those things apply to when you live here as well, right? All of those things exist. So I think it's a little bit the media that's sort of projecting what's happening with immigrants in the United States onto what could happen in Mexico. It's a little bit the Mexican media wanting to take advantage of sort of the protests and the rising cost of living to attack the current administration. There's some politics behind that. But I think the takeaway for everyone listening here is Mexico is more open and welcoming than ever. There's no doubt about that. I have felt, and I travel constantly throughout the country, never, ever have felt unwelcome as a foreign-born person in this country.
Yeah, same. I've interviewed, I mean, I'm Mexican, so maybe I can't speak on this myself, but I've interviewed so many different people from different countries, and not once have they ever told me that they were, treated negatively or harassed or said anything negatively to them. I think also there's like a perception of what is true based on what we see online.
Yeah.
And like the online trolls, the online comments, like that is not real life, you guys. So and the media loves to play on that too. And I'm not saying Mexico News Daily.
Yeah.
I think in fact you're the only one that I would trust would just keep it completely unbiased and just give you guys the facts.
If I can just add a point on that, Mariana, about social media, because I think, most, if not all of us get some information and I guess I'd say news, but I'd call it more information on social media, right? It's just it's increasingly common. And social media is good for certain things, right? I think social media is good for laughing, right? I in my feed, it's things that make me smile or make me laugh. It's images or quotes that give me inspiration. But I think it's really, really important. And yes, of course, I'm biased, but I think it's really important to note that you should not be getting your news from social media, right? Mm-hmm. There's too much bias. There's too many people with ulterior motives. There's no fact checking. You don't know the credibility of the person posting. Increasingly, there's AI that even confuses you if it's real or not. And so I wrote an article recently, talking about AI, and I said, look, there's a real risk that we as humans get really dumb with AI. And so we actively have to be fighting that. And one way to do that is to read, right? One way to do that is to read and read news and understand news and have critical thinking about news. And I think all of us should have that in the back of our mind, that yes, AI is great. It allows us, to get answers or get information in a millisecond. But critical thinking and analysis is important, right? Just having superficial headlines oftentimes results in you being afraid or being confused or having anxiety about where the world's going, versus taking the time 10, 15, 20 minutes a day to just read the news.
Yeah. I want to add something too, that I religiously watch all of the Mexican news, and whenever they report on, the topic of gentrification and like, this foreigner did something that caused like some controversy, and they paint that foreigner like in a really negative light, or, mm-hmm. something like that kind of gets, the locals riled up of like, oh no, we don't want that in our country. Yeah. I go read the comments, because I think the comments are very telling of the temperature of where things are. And overwhelmingly, yeah, there's comments of like, yeah, we don't want people like that in our country. Get them out. I mean, I'm going to say it in a less colorful way than people are probably saying it online. But I also see a constant flood of comments saying those people do not represent us all. Okay. Like, we Mexicans are very welcoming of our neighbors from the north, as long as they are, respectful of our culture. They respect Mexico. They don't come and complain about everything, our music, our noise, our fabric, like just the folklore of the country. So
Great point.
just giving you guys some perspective that like I read the comments so much on those things, and overwhelmingly I see people saying they do not represent us. I am more than happy to like welcome a foreigner as long as they are willing to come and contribute, be a good guest, try to learn the language, maybe volunteer, those kinds of things. So anyway, just pointing that out.
It's a great point. I think, again, you got to step back and for those that are listening from the US, whether you like or love Fox News or CNN, they're not giving you necessarily the full perspective, right? They have a motive and an objective in what they're presenting you. And the Mexican media is no different, right? So, the current president has an 80% approval rating, right? Think about that. She has the highest approval rating of any leader in the world right now. And so if you're from the political party, and media organizations in Mexico, as they do in the US and elsewhere, tend to align themselves with political parties, they have a vested interest in trying to make it sound like things aren't going very well, right? And so you have to remember that. And when you're reading, and that's why you have to seek out sort of beyond these social media headlines or 2-second video posts. We have Mexican writers of different age groups and across the country, and they write Mexican perspective articles, right? And I think if you just think of, we had a whole series of our writers from different parts of the country, different ethnicities, different ages, writing about their perspectives on gentrification. And I think, one of the unifying themes was whether you're an expat already living in Mexico or a Mexican living in Mexico, a common theme was, we don't want Mexico to become the United States, right? Mexicans are proud of Mexico. They love many things of the United States, but they don't want it to become the United States. Mm-hmm. Many of the expats living here love their native country, but they didn't move to Mexico for it to become the United States, right? And so I think that's really the biggest fear. And we write a lot about that, about sort of how to be a responsible expat, how to maybe think a little bit differently about why you're coming here, what you're going to do when you come here. Because if you just move to Mexico, well, first of all, I'd say, I say to a lot of people, make sure you know why you want to come here, right? If the main reason you're coming here is, because it's cheap or because the weather is great, that's fine. I would challenge you to think more than that, but it's sort of that narrow thinking that I guess concerns expats who are already here and Mexicans. Let me just give you one quick example. For anyone who's been in San Miguel de Allende, it's an almost 500-year-old city, super colonial, very strict building codes in the central city. And many expats, I hear, lament the fact that there's no Costco here. I mean, genuinely, if you asked, and maybe we'll do it, although it's a little depressing perhaps, but one of the biggest, if you asked 100 expats in this city, if you could wave the wand and have one business come to San Miguel, what would it be? I bet you the vast majority would say Costco. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that makes a lot of locals cringe. It makes a lot of the people who have been here a long time cringe. Nothing against Costco. There's one 45 minutes away in Querétaro. There's one 45 minutes away in Celaya. But to think that a Costco, again, nothing against the organization. I think it's a great company. But to think that a Costco in San Miguel de Allende or the central area is a good idea is sort of not getting the essence of what makes San Miguel special, right? What makes it special is all these little corner places where you can buy fruit or buy vegetables, have a human connection with the little old lady who's been selling fruit at that market for so many years, buying tamales or tortillas on the street. It's that dynamic that makes it special. And bringing in a Costco and bringing in sort of the mindset 100% of the United States will change it. And that's where the tension comes in, I think.
Yeah. Instead of getting, the freshly made donuts from the cart, you're going to have the lady that buys all the cakes at Costco selling you the same slices, and you're going to get the same slices on every corner. So you would lose some of that local taste, that local flavor. I agree. But, people do like Costco. I get it too. So I Mexicans too. I understand.
Mexicans love it. Americans love it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But
I get it.
It's important to understand, what makes a place special, right?
Yeah. Which, speaking of, I know that, you're a very big promoter of San Miguel de Allende, naturally, because you live there. But, just based on what your readers tell you and the feedback that you get from the people that you meet. So what are some of the main reasons that San Miguel has stayed so consistently at the top of the list of places to move to in Mexico?
Good question. I'm actually writing an article for this weekend. I write a sort of a perspective piece connecting the dots on what's going on in the country, on what I hear, or what I'm concerned about every Saturday. And this weekend, I'm actually going to talk about sort of the magic of San Miguel de Allende, because there's a lot of cynicism out there about San Miguel, right? We just recently won this award in Travel and Leisure magazine for, and I'm going to put it in quotes, the best city in the world. Yeah. And those awards are met with a combination of pride and real cynicism. And I think it's a little sad about, when people express the cynicism, because there really is some real magic in the city. I mean, that, any city could try to win these awards, right? And yet, for some reason, San Miguel almost always comes out on top. And I guess one of the things that I see, if I had to put it in one word, what makes San Miguel special, without a doubt, it's the people. It's the people that live here. And somehow, and this is increasingly rare around the world, somehow San Miguel has been able to keep this mix of locals who were born here, Mexicans from across the country who are moving here, and foreigners from around the world who are moving here, right? And that mix, in the size of the city that San Miguel is, the fact where we're all sort of mashed together, right? We're not in, completely separate areas and separate neighborhoods or whatever. We're all mashed together, and it works, right? It is such a special part of it. You're just as likely to see a Canadian as a young American family, as a family that just moved here from Ajijic, to Mexico City residents, young professionals who've moved here and are going to start a family. You can see all of those in a one block. And so that together, where you see all of that existing in harmony, is pretty cool. And the other thing I would say is, from an expat perspective, thinking again of that question of why, why are you moving to Mexico? What is it really you're looking for? Many people move here, and many people move to Mexico, but specifically San Miguel, they want to be part of a community. They want to have an impact. And I look at myself and my wife and I and what we did, and I think it's not a coincidence that we ended up in this town, given what our mission is. But there are so many people here that live here or that come here to do good for the community, whether it's dogs and cats, or young people who need help with education, or young people who need medical care, or families who need help with water collection in their rural home, or helping the elderly. There is an absolute spirit in this town that it doesn't matter if you're a Mexican from another city, a local, or a foreigner. You are in this together, right? And we as a community are going to help each other. And that you may say, every community has that. And I think they do to some extent, but it is definitely a special thing in this town.
You mentioned there are like over 100 NGOs in San Miguel de
Allende? 120 NGOs. Yeah, the majority led by expats, actually.
I need to share that with other people, because that's incredible. That's a lot of different charities and organizations. And
so anyone can find their space here, right? Anyone can find I think everybody wonders a little bit, okay, if I retire and then I move to Mexico, what am I going to do all day?
Yeah.
Right.
How do
That's
I
a real
battle this
question.
loneliness, right? It's lonely when
Yeah.
you first move. You don't know anybody. You're learning the language. You're like trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. And that, we didn't know anybody when we moved to San Miguel de Allende. We came here not knowing one single person. And I can say it for my wife and I hear it all the time. We have many more friends here than we did back at home. That is a very, very, very common sentence that you hear. And it's just because, partially people are out and about walking because the weather's great all the time. Walking is common here. Going out and eating is common. Very not driving to a strip mall, parking your car and walking in. But
Totally.
strolling, to dinner or strolling afterwards around the main square, and just that finding something that you can be a part of, whether it's volunteer teaching English to young kids, teaching computer classes to kids, helping people, figure out how to go to college is something I've been helping several kids with. There's so many opportunities, and I think that provides this sort of sense of purpose beyond just, yeah, I love the weather and the food, and if you have a real purpose and feel that connection to the community, which you can in so many places in Mexico, is really what draws people here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I constantly, because I'm always researching places for people to live and asking people for their feedback too. And I mean, just San Miguel de Allende is like constantly topping the charts year after year after year. And it's not like a large city by any means.
No.
So, it's not exactly a small town either, I don't think.
No.
But it just has this charm about it, you guys. If for any of you watching at home who have not been, it's really special. It truly is.
But for those of you rolling your eyes and saying, I'm up to here about hearing about San Miguel de Allende,
yeah.
there are dozens of awesome places, and we spend a lot of time in Mexico City. We spend a lot of time in Cabo. We spend a lot of time in the Tulum area, all very different kinds of places, but all have this, sort of special environment, I think, to live in as well. And that's why they're growing so fast. That's why so many people are moving there.
That's what makes Mexico so unique, is that really every city is different. It's not like the US that, it's just kind of like another shade of brown, like all the buildings kind of look the same. Like you can truly tell when you're in one city versus the other, one state versus the other. The way people like talk, the
food,
the accents change, the food changes, the culture changes a little bit. The indigenous tribes that are very native to that area are different. So therefore the food is different.
For sure.
But yeah, Mexico is very unique. And then the architecture is also different. It's just very, very cool. The art, the pottery, those kinds of things are different. The rugs and things that you see on the street being sold. So anyway, I think that is what makes Mexico so unique. And you mentioned something earlier too that I think people might not really understand until they actually come. And that is that you actually see life. Like you see people out. People are not just locking themselves indoors. I mean, there are plenty of people who do watch TV and spend maybe hours watching TV, but it's not really like a cultural norm to just lock yourself up for hours in your house. Like you see people in your neighborhood watering their plants or cleaning their driveway or, talking with their neighbor.
I find two things, especially jarring when I go back to the US and visit family and friends. And one is when you go to a restaurant, it feels oftentimes like there's one TV in the restaurant per person, right?
Yeah.
There's just TVs everywhere. And
watching it.
In most places in Mexico, in restaurants, there's not TVs. Unless it's, completely catering to,
a
foreigners.
Sports bar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sports bar. And so generally in restaurants, there's this human connection, with the person you're with and with the other tables, because there's no TVs, which is maybe the way it used to be in the US. And then the other thing is what you said. And I used to hear this from Mexicans visiting me in the US, and they would always say, where are all the people?
Yeah.
If you get out of central cities, you don't see people on the streets very often in the US. And as you said, it's exactly the opposite in Mexico, right? There's people everywhere. They're out, they're about. The kids are running. We have a street here in front of us that between us and the central city, and kids are playing soccer in it many evenings. And just like, I guess maybe the old days in the U.S. where you'd play sports in the road a little bit, and then you'd say, car, stop a minute, and everyone get off. That still happens here, and it's common here. And so that, my wife and I never were big TV watchers, but here we literally never watch TV. The TV and the entertainment we get, it may sound like a cliche, but it's literally just walking out our front door and just seeing life, little kids, grandmas, vendors, you name it, out on the street.
Yeah, I totally get it. Well, we have some questions from people who are chatting it up in the chat. By the way, I want to mention again, because some of you are asking, like, where's the link? I've shared it a couple of times, but I'm going to share it again in the comments. And if you want to tell people a little bit about what they get and how it's different than not having the subscription.
Sure. So Mexico News Daily, one thing I think that makes us extremely unique is we do not have advertising, zero. So usually media outlets get a lot of their revenue from advertising. And those are those pop-ups and annoying things that are blocking and not allowing you to read the news. We don't do that. We have no advertising. And so as a result, we have subscription, right? We have a low monthly or annual subscription amount that helps pay for our staff, that helps us do what we do, that helps us invest in our business. And what we're offering everyone here is 1 month of free access to Mexico News Daily. So you don't have to put in a credit card, or it's not 1 peso, so we get your credit cards, nothing like that. You just go on here, put in your email address, create a username, and you're good to go, and you've got access, unlimited access to all of our content, over 300 articles per month. We average about 10 a day, every day of the year. And so you can just start learning more about Mexico and get inspired about what's going on in the country. So 1 month of free content just by clicking on that registration tab.
And I've included it again in the link, in the comments, sorry. The link is in the comments. If you're on YouTube watching us, you should be able to see an icon that says live chat. If you're on Facebook, it'll just populate at the bottom of the video. So you might have to like scroll up. I have a good question.
I just saw one question in there that I think is important. Some people say, well, what is Mexico News Daily? Because I get this email from you guys. I've already registered. The email is just basically it's these stories of the day without reading them. It's just the picture and the title. It's just a summary. So, being a paid subscriber of Mexico News Daily means on any one of those articles, any day, you click on it and it takes you to our site and you read it. It means you can go to our site, Mexico News Daily, anytime and just read anything. You have to log in that first time from each device, but then you've just got unlimited access to all of our content.
Yeah, I did see that question from somebody like, wait, I've been subscribed already, but I never paid. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
So one person is wondering, and I get this question a lot, and I'm sure you do. So how safe is it to drive, not only to Puerto Vallarta, but from the United States to other parts in Mexico? And I know that you guys also write about this from time to time.
Yep. We had an article on driving an RV from the U.S. down the Baja California Peninsula last weekend, sort of everything you need to know about doing that. I actually took a road trip for a very big birthday that I won't mention the name, almost a year, the amount of years last year. And I wrote about road tripping in Mexico. I don't like really driving anywhere in the world. But I guess to be as clear as possible, I'd say, in general, driving in Mexico is nothing like driving in the United States. That's sort of the first point. Now, that doesn't mean unsafe. It just means very different, right? So I have been somewhat guilty of speeding a lot in the United States. The way U.S. highways are, it's hard not to speed, right? They're so perfect. That is not the case in Mexico. Even what are, sort of the super highways are not the kind of highways you can drive 80 miles an hour on. So I think safety can be different dimensions, right? I literally drive with my hands at 10 and 2 in Mexico because oftentimes, there's not the same side barriers or medians. There could be a dog, there could be garbage, there could be a truck that's hauling rocks that isn't following the same kinds of safety procedures on making sure rocks don't fall out of the truck. So you just have to be far more alert, generally driving slower, generally not distracted at all. I mean, I don't like eat, a Big Mac or something while I'm driving in Mexico.
Yeah.
But I think the safety issue as well requires just a lot of common sense. So I don't drive at night in Mexico. I don't say I would never, but Querétaro is 45 minutes from here. Living here for over 5 years, I've probably driven once or twice there at night. I just don't do it. I plan my day so I don't need to do it. Most of the reason it's because, again, there's not the kind of shoulders, there's more going on. I don't like the distractions.
You're not
I think you need to do your research, stick to highways. But if you are looking to drive from the US to Mexico and you do it during daylight and you stick on the main highways, people do it every single day, thousands and thousands of people. So I think, be smart. If you're driving a Rolls Royce or something, that maybe isn't the smartest thing. But if you're just, being smart, driving during the day, not speeding. I think another, driving safe. I've driven for almost 30 years in Mexico. I've never gotten a ticket. I've never had to pay a bribe, ever. And so I hear all these stories and, get ready to pay the federales. I've been stopped probably 20 times. It sounds like a lot, but over 30 years, it's really not. Maybe it is. And I've never had a ticket and never had to pay a bribe. I think Spanish helps, the fact that I speak Spanish. But I guess in summary, you shouldn't be worried about driving in Mexico. You should be smart and you should be prepared, right?
Yeah. And by the way, for anybody driving from the United States or Canada to Mexico, you have to have Mexican auto insurance, okay? No matter what your policy says in the United States or Canada, it is not valid in Mexico. So if it says it has international coverage, you cannot count on that being in Mexico. So FYI, just anybody wondering, if you're also driving into the free zones, like, the Baja Peninsula or parts of Sonora, parts of Tamaulipas, parts of Quintana Roo, parts of Chiapas, you don't have to get a temporary import permit. So if you drive your foreign plated car, you can drive in that free zone without a temporary import permit. You don't have to put a deposit down. You can drive your foreign plated car for as long as you'd like. For other parts of Mexico, you will have to get a temporary import permit. But yeah, I agree. Stick to driving during the day. Stick to toll roads. If a toll road is a toll road because it ends with the letter D. And then pretty soon they're going to start implementing all throughout the toll roads that you must have a pase or a electronic reader. Yeah, the iTag. So, these toll booths will no longer accept cash and coins. So anyway, you can get it at basically any gas station as soon as you cross the border. They're pretty easy to buy. But yeah, it's perfectly safe as long as you follow common sense. Like, don't leave your brain at the border.
Yep.
And it's also not like you're going into this like alien land and Mars, where I also think there's a misconception that people think that, they're immediately going to get pulled over just because they have, a foreign plate. They're going to immediately get asked for a bribe, or that, the rules of the roads are just so different that they're not going to know how to drive. And there are some differences on the rules of the road, but they're not so different that you need to it's not that different.
It was very well said, Mari. I think if you just use common sense and be safe, if anything, it's a very underwhelming experience. It's just, it's not like the US, but it's not that different either. It's really, really not that complicated. But
there are areas, and you mentioned this when you went to Loreto, that, there are areas of Mexico where maybe the roads are not they're not in the greatest shape. Or maybe
or a 2-inch shoulder, a 2-inch shoulder and there's a drop off. So
there's a cliff.
Again, the answer of those things is just slow down, drive during the day, don't be distracted.
Take it easy.
And just don't be in a rush, and then it's fine. Which again, in the US, I feel like I'm always in a rush. I'm always driving fast. I'm always angry at red lights. And and you just sort of change that chip in Mexico. You have to, because again, because of the fact that roads are different, distractions are different, etc.
Yeah. People are wondering if you have an app where they can read their news from Mexico News Daily.
We don't have an app, actually. The best way to access us is just mexiconewsdaily.com. And if you do it frequently enough, you know, your Google, when you go to your browser, it sort of creates an app, or you can actually create an icon. So you just click on it and it goes there quickly. But our website, mexiconewsdaily.com, once you're on it, it just reads like a normal app. And I guess I'd highlight one other thing. We've organized it by sections. So if you want to read business or culture or real estate or travel, you can read all the articles by that section, or you can read us by geography. So if you say, look, you know, all I really care about reading about is Baja California Peninsula, because that's where I'd like to, you know, I'd like to live someday. You just go as Mariana's showing us, and you click on Baja California Peninsula, and it's all of our content across all sections for that geography, right? And we're going to keep building out that local context. So if you go to El Bajillo, which is the center part of Mexico where I live, we now have a news roundup every 2 weeks. We cover the main events that you should know about and maybe plan for. So we continue to build out that sort of local perspective. But, you know, we at the end of the day, we believe it's important to understand what's going on in the broader country as well, right? So we do write it for that, right? We're not going to write things using acronyms you don't understand. We're not going to reference politicians or business people that you don't even know. That's what we do. We rewrite things so that it'll make sense to you as an expat or as a foreigner.
Yeah. And a lot of also what I love also is that a lot of the information that you guys are getting are from, you know, like actual newspapers in Mexico. You're just translating it to English, and in simple English, by the way, so that people can understand. You know, they don't have to use Google Translate, and then we all know that doesn't translate exactly right.
We have a team that starting at 6 a.m. is looking at press releases by the government, press releases by businesses, scanning all the major Mexico national newspapers, local newspapers. And by 8 a.m, you know, we have a team that's come up with what are we going to write about that foreigners will most care about today, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
Absolutely. So Mexico Relocation Guide can help you get to Mexico the right way. And then once you're in Mexico, or even before you move to Mexico, Mexico News Daily can help you stay abreast or stay informed of what is going on in the country without a bias, just facts, and then some very, very informative opinion pieces that just give you just like a sense of what is going on in different cities. So anyway, that's
Just
how we can, you know,
Mariana,
as a team, help you guys out.
On any given day, more than 80% of the people reading us are not in Mexico. So it's actually people not in Mexico yet, 8 out of 10 every day, that are reading us to learn more about the country. Just for some perspective, we have now over 1 million unique readers per month. Today, we're having a good day. We're going to be over 100,000 different people reading Mexico News Daily just today.
That's wonderful. Great job. Yeah, great job. I have one more question, and I think that that'll be, you know, just where we wrap up today. But
sure.
I pulled up your article here on the tipping point, and I hone in on this a lot in our newsletter. I talk about it on videos. I talk about it in blog posts. And it's just like this idea of anybody can say, like, you know, how to be a good guest in the country, but what does that mean, right? Like, give us actual practical examples of what that means. And I talk about learning what the true cost of things is. Just because you think of, you know, $1,500 a month rental is affordable to you doesn't mean that it's affordable to every single local either. Like, you have to put that into perspective. So you really have to understand what the cost of things really is, and whether you're like maybe getting overcharged for things, or if that's actually the common price or the going rate for things like that. And I give rentals as an example, but I think tipping is a really important one, because I think that it starts from the very bottom, and then it goes to the more expensive things.
Sure.
And tipping,
Sure.
like, not even that long ago, 2-3 years ago, in Mexico, 10% was very much the norm across the country.
Absolutely.
And then like it started getting a little bit more normalized, that like 15% was actually more the norm, especially in Mexico City, or maybe like in certain neighborhoods of Mexico City where, the cost of living is a little more expensive. So for you guys who are watching from maybe from Canada or the United States, Europe is less likely that you'll have this, question, because tipping in Europe isn't really a thing. But anyway, so, in the United States and Canada, 20% is kind of the norm. And then really now it's like 25% is the norm. And if you start coming with that mentality to Mexico and you just start tipping everywhere 20-25%, and everybody starts doing that, that's where you start changing the cost of living at a micro level. And that's where the locals start resenting that. So I think that piece was really, really important. And I love it. And I think we think very similarly that, hey, learn what the local traditions and customs are. That way you're not, inadvertently, you're trying to be helpful because you make more than maybe the local person who is waiting your table is. But maybe you're inadvertently actually hurting the local economy.
It's well said. More is not, it's not as simple as just saying, well, a bigger tip is better, right? It's just not that simple. And that's why it's so important, as you said, learn the culture, understand the norms. It doesn't mean you can't challenge them. It doesn't mean you can't choose to tip whatever you want, using this example of tipping. But it's important to understand. And again, that goes back to what people are concerned about in Mexico, that people, if they come here not being curious, not trying to learn the local norms and just saying, look, this is the way I do it in the US or Canada, that can have a real profound impact, and not necessarily in a good way. So it's that, wanting to learn, wanting to be curious, wanting to understand, and then it's not that hard, right? This isn't that hard. So I think that's an important message to take away. It may seem, when you're considering moving here, you feel like you're this rebel and you're the crazy person in your neighborhood or your family. And then you get down here and you're surrounded by people who've done this, right? And you realize, okay, what I thought was this crazy, huge decision, tons of people are doing. So, there's no time like the present to go for it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being my guest. Any closing words for anybody thinking of moving to Mexico?
I just think, it's an uncertain world. It's in some sad ways, a little bit of a depressing time, whether it's political or some of the wars going on in the world, or uncertainty about the economy, or major uncertainty about the role of artificial intelligence and what it's going to bring, debt crisis. There's so much going on that it's easy to get so absorbed in that and forget that the clock of life is ticking, right? And so my wife and I came down here, I was 45 years old when we did it. And I can tell you with the utmost sincerity that we are so happy that we came earlier. The number one regret we hear from so many people living here is, I wish I had come sooner. I wish I hadn't waited until I was 62 or 65 or 67. I wish I had come sooner. And so, I'm not in the business of tourism or real estate or relocation or anything like that. I'm just telling the story of myself and my wife and I and many people that I talk to. And the consistent theme is, I wish I had done it sooner.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, time is passing. So, don't get so absorbed by the doom and gloom. Because really, if you really like put into perspective, the way we treat each other hasn't really changed that much. It's just what, big media wants us to think, that we're really divided. But really, we're just the same. We deal with the same problems in this country or in other countries.
A lot of Mexico is still that sort of more simple time. I mean, we have a lot of friends here now that have kids, and they all say, it reminds me of what it was like when I was a kid, right? Again, kids playing in the street, kids walking, around and getting ice cream. The rat race doesn't exist to the same extent that it does in the US.
Totally.
And so, it's a special place to call home for sure.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much, Travis. And I'm going to share with you guys just one more time before we end this call, just in case some of you just jumped on, what the link is for the free month. And I can't thank you enough for offering that to anybody who's watching. I think that's awesome. And that you don't ask for a credit card. I bet you'll get a lot of people to sign up and then continue, resubscribing after that once they see the value that they get. So thank you again for joining me and for just sharing with people that are watching, just your perspective.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Mariana.
Thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for my next live stream. If you are not signed up to my newsletter yet, go to mexicorelocationguide.com/newsletter. That is where I tell you when we're doing these live streams, who I'm bringing on, what the topic is. So join that newsletter. It's completely free. I share other things like cost of living comparisons and best places to live and residency visa updates and all kinds of things. So join that newsletter. But thank you all. This is our sign off, and I'll see you guys soon. Nos vemos.
Thank you.